Alex Garcia. Let's talk about a new kind of tropical cyclone that was recently discovered. SETIO. We don't know exactly how to say it, but it's an
Yeah.
acronym, right?
Yeah, it's an acronym. It's Southeast Tropical Indian Ocean, because that's where these things form.
Okay, so tell me about what it is and how it's different from a different tropical cyclone that we may experience here.
Well, it's a little different in that it forms in that part of the Indian Ocean, and it only happens during the IOD, which is the Indian Ocean Dipole. And that is pretty much a connection to what we know as ENSO, which is La Nina and El Nino. And it works very much the same way. You get one thing that comes up, you get positive effects, you get water that upwells or doesn't, you get warm water in the other one. And this thing helps to bring warmer water into the Indian Ocean, which brings rain. And so they're kind of different in that respect. The other respect is they don't last very long. We're thinking maybe 8-10 days at best.
Okay, so how are they discovered?
A couple of scientists out of Australia were looking at different wind patterns and trying to see where does the rain pattern come from? Where does the drought pattern come from? And they were looking at all the data, and they noticed these little spin-up storms that just came out of like almost nowhere. So they started to go back and go through the data, and they found out that every 3 to 5 years, you get these little spin-up storms. And what these storms do is they help push in warm water from the Pacific, and that would suppress the upwelling that happens there in the southeast portion of the Indian Ocean, and that means pretty nice rain. If those storms don't develop, and they went back and found years where there weren't any, then a major drought was happening all throughout Australia and all of those little island countries that are out there in the southeast tropical area.
How many years did they study? Have these always been around and they're just recently discovered, or is this kind of a recent development due to climate?
No, they've always been there. They're going back through the data now. They in their own words, they said, these things were flying underneath the radar. We didn't even know they existed until we started looking at the fine points of the data. So they just found them. I think they've always been there.
What about the track on them? Do they track towards land? Are they particularly dangerous?
They can get up there around 74 miles an hour. Category 1 storm is what I'm seeing so far on the data. So yeah, if they can track into land, we'll do that. They're in the southern portion of the hemisphere, so they're going to go backwards. They're not like our hurricanes. They go the other way around, but they do track out toward the west, and most of the time will track away from Australia or track away from land. At least that's what they're seeing now. But the benefit is bringing warmer water in, which allows more water to evaporate in the atmosphere, and it provides rain, particularly out there for Australia and the islands.
So why is it important to study ocean patterns like this?
Well, it's important very much because of what we do. This thing is almost connected season for season with the El Nino and La Nina process, because when they both happen together, when they both happen at the same time, you get a positive on one side, you get a positive here in the Indian Ocean Dipole, then that means you've got nothing going on to really suppress all of that water that's upwelling, and you end up with a major drought. So it's a big climate factor, and now they're beginning to understand what causes the big droughts, the major droughts that happen in Australia and back on those eastern islands, and what causes the major flooding over in Africa. Because when you start to get the westerlies that go through there and really suppress all of that upwelling, when those things begin to weaken, then you end up with major flooding that goes on one side, which is out in Africa, and you end up with major drought that comes back over toward Australia. So it's important to understand how these things cycle. They don't quite cycle the same way that the El Nino La Nina does, because we're looking at a cycle there that used to be 11 years. Now it's down to 5, now it's down to 3, and now we're going on 3 years with La Nina. So there's no cycle there. Here in the IOD, we still have a 3 to 5 year cycle. So there's some years that it's in sync, other years that it's not.
And I guess better understanding them can help people better prepare for droughts or floods, correct?
Yes, exactly. You're either going to have a major drought or you're going to have major flooding that goes on.